So let's talk about for in versus for off. So these two new ways to iterate over arrays and other type of data structures, as we'll see in a minute, they were introduced in 2015. So 2015 was the big JavaScript release where lots of new functionalities were added. The previous release was 4 years ago in 2011, right? So after 4 years, the web massively evolved, and then in 2015, finally JavaScript incorporated some really good utilities to the standard, right? So the first thing I would like to do is to show for in. So let's start with a very simple example. So I have a list of fruits, which is apple, banana, and orange, right? So essentially with for in, we can iterate, right? So before that, we can use a for loop. You remember for let I equals 0. You remember all these things, right? Classic for loop. We also have the for each. Do you remember for each? We learned that last week, right? First for each. We have map. We have reduce. We have filter. We have lots of different methods that apply on arrays, right? But now the for in methods gives us the opportunity to do something a bit different. Look. We can do for and then create a variable. And please pay attention to the name of the variable. So if we do a console log of the index, what do you think it will display? What? Free. But free what? Free fruits. No, wrong. Close, but wrong. Wrong. 0 and 2, I like that. That's why I call it index. Semantics, right? I'm pretty sure if I wouldn't care about semantics and I would have decided to call it fruit, everyone probably will have proposed the wrong answer, right? I will say apple, banana, and orange. But with for in, we don't get the elements of the array, we get the indexes, at least when talking about arrays. You see? 0, 1, and 2, right? Let me change the example. That's what happened with arrays. But what happened if what we got is an object? First name, Peter, last name, William, right? Before going any further, I'm going to rename that. It's not a list of fruits anymore, right? And this is the classic example that as I have no idea about the semantics of my data, I'll keep it generic, right? So you know that data, I don't like to call things data, but still, data is better than fruits if I'm referring to a player, right? At least data means, hey, I don't know, I'm telling you nothing, but something is better to say nothing than to assert something wrong, right? So what will this display?
Zero.
0. No, wrong. That will display the keys of the object. You see? So essentially, with for in, what we got is we got an indirect way to check the values of the object that we are working with. So for ins work with enumerable, if that's the good way to pronounce that word. Is it enumerable? How do you say that? Enumerable, correct, enumerable. So for ins works with enumerable properties on arrays, on objects, but also with strings. Look at that. What will index return now? Oh.
Yeah, so we'll turn the whole entire string, I think.
The whole string. Wrong. There is 1 point on the board challenge for whoever gives the answer.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Starting at 1.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh,
Right. Point for Natasha. Look. The indexes. Right? That looks a bit weird. Looks a bit weird. But if we recap a bit, there is a really good reason for that. Look, I'm going to roll back. I'm going to put the first example on the arrays to prove why accessing the index or the enumerable that thing, the index, is something that makes sense. Look, how at the moment, okay, let's recap. Let's see if you were paying attention on the last 7 minutes. So what will this return? 0 and 2, correct. Right, but what if I don't want to display 0 and 2, but I want to display apple, banana, orange? How do we do that? Dot what? Wrong.
Square bracket index.
Correct. That's the way we access element of an array, right? Index 0, index 1, index 2. So let me rename again fruits with data. Right? And now, as you can see, we get the list of fruits. Why this is, if you didn't notice it, why this is particularly interesting? Because now, if I have a list of key values within an object, back to the previous example, what will that display? What? Correct.
Peter and William.
Correct. Both Megan and Bala are right. You see?
No, it's me, Mo.
Oh, Mo, sorry. You got the same voice. You should change it. You should install some software to change the voice, right? Right. So that's correct. You see, we didn't have to change that line, and now we got each individual element, right? And finally, back to the original example. If we display that, so what will be the output? A what?
You print the same thing. Don't print the same thing.
What's the same thing? How many times console log? How many times? Okay,
Same string.
the same string, right? So, right. Let me simplify that. Right, breakpoints. Jonan.
Just with one breakpoint.
Yeah?
I'm going to say 5.
5. Wrong. Then we got Poppy.
KODIRI is different.
How many? Okay, tell me breakpoints.
1, 2, 3. So KODIRI 6.
Poppy is right. Right. Remember. Do you remember when we played index in data that it displays 0, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, up to 23 or 24, right? This is because the way to enumerate the different properties of that variable is literally just going one after the other, right? So that will display, as Poppy suggested, KODIRI. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's it, right? So, for in works with any type of data that can be enumerated, can be looped if you want somehow. Can we loop on an array? Yes, of course we can. Can we loop on a string? Yes. Technically speaking, we can, right? One after the other. Can we loop on an object? Yes, we can list the properties of an object. Can we loop on a Boolean, for example? Look. Let me display the index. Nothing really happens. To me, that doesn't make sense. We cannot loop over a Boolean because so how many iterations a Boolean has? That's a weird thing, right? What happens if we got a number? Does it make any sense? No, it doesn't make sense neither. Right? So the thing is, for in works with arrays, strings, and objects. So whenever you want to retrieve the list of keys or the list of values of an object, for in will work. Of course, if you are not a big fan of for in, you can use object.keys or object.values. That's an alternative. But at least you know that I will work with for in. One more thing here. Even though for in works with strings, arrays, and objects, it's only advisable to use it with objects. So we shouldn't use for in on arrays and strings. Why? Because the standard of for in doesn't necessarily guarantee the order of the enumerated properties of the data we are dealing with. In other words, if we have an array of hello, welcome to Caldiri, do you think that the order matters here? By definition, if you create an array, it's because you look after the order of the elements, right? Otherwise, probably there is no point of dealing with arrays. You could create an object, I believe, right? So generally speaking, when you create an array, the order matters, right? Because the order matters, we shouldn't use for in to display the elements of the array. It will probably work fine. You see, it does respect the original order, but this is probably because Google Chrome decided to respect the order. But according to the standard, when we enumerate properties of a collection, JavaScript doesn't necessarily have to respect the same order, right? Same thing applies with the strings. So if I got hello and I want to enumerate the elements of hello, not out of coincidence, of course, but in that particular case, yeah, the order is respected. But again, Chrome may have displayed these values on a different order, right? However, if we have an object with objects, as we've discussed several times already, the order of the properties of the object are not guaranteed neither, right? When we have an object, there is no way to sort the properties of the object because each browser will apply a different criteria. Could be a chronological criteria, could be an alphabetical criteria, it depends, right? Because by definition, when you have an object, the order is not relevant, then the order we enumerate the properties of the object is not relevant neither, right? That's why for in makes a lot of sense when we deal with objects. It's not that particularly convenient when we deal with arrays and strings. Any question? No? Cool. Bala, Mo, Hazel?
No question.
Cool. Right. So, let's have a look to the next topic, which is for off. So, for off is kind of similar to for in, but with some obvious differences. Let's go back to the previous example, the array. So the array, hello, welcome to Caldiri. So do you remember what the index returned here? It's the third time I asked the same question today.
0 to 3.
0 to 3. That's correct. That's correct. 0 to 3. But if we use off, what will it return? Values. That's correct, Poppy. So for in points to the key of the enumerable property. For off points to the value of the iterable or iterable data you are dealing with. That's the main difference, right? So this is when we talk about arrays. Is index a good name, by the way? Probably not, right? If I have an index, I'm thinking about numbers. That's the first thing. Index 0, index 1, maybe keys if you want. Okay, I may accept that. But in that particular case, we're clearly talking about values, right? So can we do that? Right?
Yeah,
So
values.
that gives a better feeling to your colleagues about what are you trying to do in that particular snippet, right? What happens if we have a string? What will this return? How many times line number 5 will run? Once. So Natasha says that line number 5 runs once. Right or wrong?
Wrong.
Wrong. Why, Yonan?
15.
15 times. Well, yes, that's correct. I don't know if it's 15 or 12, but anyway, Natasha, that will run individually. Yeah, and it won't display the index. It won't display 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It will display the value HELL 1, 2. You see? It's pretty much the same as an array, right? Just the values. Make sense? That's easy, right? But now, what happens if we apply for off with objects? The names, Peter and William. That makes sense. That makes sense. But, ooh, look, we got an error. Data is not iterable. We cannot use for off on objects because of the same reason. Because an object cannot be iterated like that in a sequential order. Right? We don't have any first property, we don't have any second property, right? That's why we cannot use for off with objects. If you find this is a bit confusing, I'm going to send you a very interesting link that clearly helps you to understand the differences between for in and for off. That table is really good. So you can see for in applies to enumerable properties, right? So which data types have enumerable properties? Arrays, strings, and objects. Can we use it with objects? Yes. With arrays? Yes, but not advised. Do you remember? Because the results may not follow the original order of the array. Can we use it with the strings? The same thing. You can see that arrays and strings, they play alongside, right? They react similarly in this kind of problems. So it's not advised to use it with the strings. And then we got for off. For off works with iterable collections. So essentially, it works with data structures that can be followed using a sequential order from the beginning to the end. Thus, an array has a clear beginning and a clear end. Yes, we can do array 0, array 1, array 2, array 3, and strings. Can we do string 0, string 1, string 2, string 3? Yes. Of course we can, right? It works as well. Can we do object 0, object 1, object 2, object 2, object 3? No. That's why we can't use for of with objects.
Because they have keys.
They have keys, correct. Because both arrays and strings, they got indexes. So in other words, if my data is hello, I can do hello 0, right? Oops, wait a minute. Data of 0, H. Data of 1, I can iterate following a sequential order. If I have an array, it's pretty much the same thing. I can iterate. So what will data 1 return? What? Codiri, correct. We can iterate. But what if we have that? Can we do data 0 or data 1? That doesn't make sense. Undefined. We can't access to the first or to the second property because objects don't understand the concept, the principle of sequential order. Right? So that's pretty much it. I'll send that link in a minute because I think it's a very interesting, it's a really, really good article that someone created. I think pretty much explains what we've been talking about. And also there is a very interesting discussion at the bottom in case you want to explore a bit further about the differences, advantages, disadvantages, and stuff like that. Right. Any question? I'm curious to see, because I know that some of you, when you do a coding challenge, you use for in often, right? So, again, it's nothing wrong, yes? Out of curiosity, so do you prefer to use for in, or do you prefer to use object.keys, object.values? Which one and why?
I'll be honest.
Yeah?
So it's going to be a bad reason.
Yeah.
I prefer to use object.keys, but that's just mainly because that's like the first thing I was showing when doing training. But the problem is, that's my reason for almost using everything.
Yeah.
Using map. To be honest, I didn't know you could just. I didn't know you could just use the for loop to do the same
Yep.
thing with map and
Yep.
the other stuff.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Itamar. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I would prefer for in. I tried it in one challenge, I think a while ago, but I couldn't get it to work.
Yeah.
So I made the classic error.
Yeah.
I tried to return, you work on index.
Yeah, okay, cool, nice. Mo, ACL, Vala, yeah.
Well, quick one from me. Are there any problems that we cannot solve with the map, reduce, or filter that we need to use map in or map? For in or for off?
I mean, no, not really. They're equivalent to some extent, right? They are completely equivalent. Both are valid, both mechanisms are valid to iterate over arrays. I will say that for in is a bit more flexible, right? Because with for in we can iterate easily on strings, for example. If we use map or filter or reduce, we need to transform the string to an array. How do we transform strings to arrays? Split, correct, right? Which is not a big deal, we can do that, right? I personally, I don't really use for in because of two reasons. First of all, because the more complex exercises you do with JavaScript, you'll notice that on the expert training eventually, the best way to solve problems is to transforming everything into an array. It doesn't matter if you have a string, if you have an object, you end up transforming pretty much everything into an array. Why? Because arrays are very powerful in JavaScript. So you have an array, you can iterate, you can filter, you can find, you can map, you can reduce, it's very powerful. If I use a for in, I don't really have an array. I'm iterating over the array, but it's a bit I cannot chain. I can with arrays I can do map, then filter, then find, then reduce, then sort. You know, I can chain multiple actions. With for in, it's like a bit different, right? It's a different structure that doesn't work that well, at least for me in my mind. Also, because of historical reasons, in the old times, the only way, not the only way, that's not true, but the common way to iterate over arrays was using a for loop. But then starting from 2011, we also got for each. Once we managed to start using for each, using for open parentheses was a bit old school, right? So now we're a bit like, oh, I don't want to do that again, right? Again, something maybe psychological, so I don't have any technical reason to not to use for in or for off. Anything else, guys? No? No? Okay, so that was it for today, guys. Thank you for watching.